Pop in, say hi. If you've never come into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. This is actually my very first live. This is the live that I started probably, it's got to be 6 or 7 years ago. For the first couple of years, I spent it on Instagram, the same show, but in practicing my craft, in getting comfortable in what I was doing. That was a little bit of a process for me. And it was also a totally different audience that I had over on Instagram. I was very involved physically. Like physically, people would come in live with me and we would chit chat live and stuff. It was a totally different experience. It was a different experience and I enjoyed it, but it was also very hard. But I think it was very hard because I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. Like I said, it was in practicing my craft. Hello, and it was in practicing my craft where I get better and better, where I get a little bit more comfortable in what I'm doing. And also, it's in that starting to feel comfortable that you get to have that little bit extra confidence, that because you believe things to be true. But, the people that you hang out with might not think so. And everybody has a right to bring to the table what they want to and to believe what they want to. And I work hard not to push my ideas on people, but I do come into my own lives to get the lessons for myself. And I recognize for myself that there is a long ways to go in what I want to accomplish, and in just showing up and just being myself, right? And not pretending to be something that I'm not, but at the same time, right? It's called imposter syndrome. Not to put myself in a state where, I might not have that little bit of confidence that I have accumulated for myself, that, that I might talk myself into not showing up, or that I don't have anything to contribute, or I'll never be good enough. And what am I being good at? I'm being good at being me, in recognizing, that as I make that little bit of movement for myself, as I live my life, because life is what happens while you're making other plans, that I'm not setting in stone where that end destination is going to be. I'm just going to enjoy hanging out with you guys in the meantime. Right? Just keep going, keep living my life, keep contributing the way that I feel that passion and that compel to contribute, and to enjoy myself, right? To enjoy myself and be grateful. Oh my goodness, I came across something I wrote. I don't even know what it was, and I reread it and I went, oh my goodness, I've got to save this and I've got to read this to my crew tonight. And I can't even remember what it was, let alone what I had written down. But I know it had something in the lines of being grateful. And it was a list I had made in all the things that I was grateful for. And it was last year when I was coming back from my trip, not this past year. I wasn't quite prepared this year, right? This year was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't have much prep time emotionally and mentally to come back in that let's go get her kind of attitude. Though in a way I was still compelled because I had my adventures to share with the people who've been hanging out with me all this time. So without wanting to, and without actually knowing what to do, I still had things to do and I still made that movement. And it just happened naturally because it was just part of my life, right? That, whatever I share here usually is based on something going on in my life in the moment, whether physically, emotionally, or mentally. And that's the truth, right? Otherwise, how would I fill up an hour and a half of chit chats? Okay, you guys, tell me how your week's been going. Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much. Oh, I appreciate that. If you guys haven't seen, I know Owen has seen. It was kind of you to comment it, but I put up my post for our Christmas Eve party that we've been doing now for probably, I would have to say 7. I might even say 8 years. I'm going to have to come back and count all the way back. But I think it was pretty early on. I think it was one of the first ways that, I brought myself to start feeling comfortable in coming online. I'm a big believer in baby steps and starting things slow and walking into things and making small adjustments and having those failures and having those successes, and then to see what comes from that, and then make new goals and make new decisions. But this idea of showing up every Christmas Eve, it came from that because I was so afraid to come in front of the camera, to have something to say, to be seen, to be heard, you know. And again, it was that idea, I had confidence in myself, but I wasn't too sure if other people would have confidence in me. And because I was sharing, right, my experience, life is what happens to you while you're making other plans, as I'm making that movement, it wasn't that I could come in as the authority on anything. It was just every day, just showing up as the student as that I was, as that naive person that, was doing their very best to put their step, uh, one foot forward day after day, and building up that confidence and having that belief in myself, but understanding that in the direction that I was moving in, that I felt to move in, wasn't a super popular topic in the moment, but I couldn't help it, right? I had to be genuine in that. And, look at me. I'm here. I'm here every single day, Monday to Friday, and I come in on Sundays. And it's not a matter of being afraid to show up, to come on to the other side of the camera anymore. And that only came from practicing, right? And when I started practicing my craft on Instagram and then bringing it here and carrying on where I left off, and just even the past couple of years, even in being back on YouTube, I have learned so much in that process. And I say back on YouTube 6 days a week, right, where I was only doing one day a week. But I have to trust that, right, lots of people aren't even doing the one day a week, and lots of people aren't even interested in social media to start with, unless they're being entertained or educated or being kept company with. But, for myself, this is where I found my voice, in those practicing all the time. And then eventually, I did show up and I was able to go live. I was able to come in front of the camera, and I was able to make those little bit of adjustments in my life and not have it well, they were still big pivots, but maybe not look like they were as major pivots as they actually were, right? Because wow, I've had some doozies in that adjustment into what brought me to this point for sure, right? But I try to dictate that little bit of change myself so I don't have to have too many of those doozies. Okay. Oh, Andrew's here. Hello, Andrew. How's your week been going? I hope everybody's having an amazing week. I was just talking about my post that I just put my post up to announce the Christmas Eve party this year. Everybody's welcome to come and hang out with us. I usually show up on my pajamas on Christmas Eve, and I sit and sometimes I have a cocktail. Sometimes I just have a cup of coffee and I open up my stocking and we just have a nice evening for a couple of hours. Lots of us, the big holidays are not as enthusiastically uh, um, immersed in every year like it is with the majority. When we go in and celebrate these holidays. When it comes to the holidays, even my birthdays. I'm not big on the celebrating. Everybody likes a present. Everybody likes a cat cake. Everybody likes to be remembered, right? But to make it a big deal, surprise parties, going out for dinner, and right, these are special occasions every once in a while, and that's really nice. But with me not expecting it, not being the norm in my life, when these holidays do show up, and some holidays have been marred in their enjoyability for sure. I have problems with Easter's, even with Christmas a little bit, and oh, my birthday, oh, my marriage fell apart on my birthday, right? Holidays have never been a focal point except to remind me of something uncomfortable or painful or hurtful. So for myself, I'm happy that on Christmas Eve that we can have this little get together. And I feel that in my own community and being able to be myself, not to put on airs and be somebody else. I will be at my sister's on Christmas Eve, but we're also expecting a new great grandniece in the family on Christmas Day, so the baby could show up any single day, and then Christmas plans could be right kind of cut in half because part of the family will be celebrating a new member of the family. And but does every Christmas have to be perfect? Has every Christmas ever been perfect? I know it hasn't been in my life. I've had amazing, beautiful Christmas. I've had some stinker Christmases, and I've had some Christmases that have pulled in some amazing, amazing memories. And whether those memories are really amazing or they're just right good or okay, or right, I remember when I was 16, it kind of imprinted me on the way that it's for me, it's not a huge thing. It would have been a different story with a different experience, but that's the thing with any one of us, right? I could have even been born in a different culture where Christmas isn't even celebrated. I was saying this on my uh what's my good cheer show this week, that I walked to the grocery store, and I live on a couple of main drags. I live on a main drag, and then the side street is also a main drag. And I was walking down uh, this main drag, and it's just fancy restaurants and stuff. And there's this one restaurant, it's Middle Eastern restaurant and stuff, and they had a big Christmas tree in the window and lights going on and everything. And I thought that was so amazing because most likely they're not Christian, they're Muslim, right? And the way that we celebrate Christmas as a cultural thing, not a religious thing, that we have that option to do it that way. I think it's amazing. I think Christmas is amazing, even, for myself, where religion, right? It's Turkey Day, right? For some people, it's Turkey Day. Sometimes it's a day for the kids. It's Santa Claus and presents, and for some people it is a very holy religious day. But to celebrate it as a celebration, a holiday of the country, rather than a holiday of a religion, I think that's pretty amazing. Exactly. If correct me if I'm wrong, I think even Christmas, December 25th, wasn't even Christ's birthday, that it was actually another holiday, pagan holiday or something. But because everybody was celebrating and Christianity wasn't, right, super tolerable at that time, it was a way to celebrate Christmas in the mixed, and it wouldn't be looked at as something odd or off, right? I get it. There's lots of things in this world that aren't acceptable, and sometimes it just takes time, right? Sometimes it does take butting heads, but eventually, if it's not right, right, we're smart. Human beings are smart. Even though we have a tolerance for some unkindnesses, and whether that tolerance is because we can't be bothered, or sometimes we have that tolerance because it's not safe to have that voice, right? To say something, to be the person that speaks up on behalf, right? Because that could be unsafe, right? We don't live in that world where we can just point things out at any moment without consideration of the safety of yourself and of your family and the people that you care for. I take note of that all the time, right? In what you do. I take it note not for that reason specifically, but I have this understanding that somewheres down the road we're going to meet up again, and how we end relationships are just as important as how we walk into a relationship and build that first impressions. Last impressions are important too, very important. Okay. uh it got really cold here in Bloomington for now. I'm nearing the end of a work project, and at home I've started going through files and papers, shredding and organizing. Funny that you say that, Andrew, because that's what I was doing today. That was my project. Well, that's been the project for about a week now. That was one of the big ones that I had to get done. All my paperwork. I got through all. I have a bottom drawer here, so as important papers come in and stuff after I've dealt with them and made my phone calls or my payments or whatever, I have a bottom drawer here and I throw it in the bottom drawer. And then once every few months, I go in, I grab all those papers and I file everything away. But on my trips in September, I go with binders, and I come home with binders of papers and receipts and adventures and pamphlets and trail maps. And so I had a lot of paperwork. So I pulled out about 6 binders, and opened up everything, every envelope, every file, and I cleaned every single one out. I had a half a garbage bag full of paperwork. But unlike you, I don't have a shredder, Andrew. I had to like shred it with my hand in some parts and then put them in separate bags so they, right? But I got the job. I got the job done, and it's a job that needed to be done. And it actually, even though it took most of the day today to do it, I did it at a really nice, slow pace, like nice, relaxing pace, because I knew this was the project and I was just going to do it and I was going to get done. So I did a really nice job, and I did all my drawers, made sure I got every single important paper that I could find, and it all got properly filed away. And I'm really happy that I did, because now I got a little office area in my linen closet. Right. I have one king size sheet that I like to use on a queen size bed because it's nice and easy to make my bed. Right. So when it's laundry day, I wash that sheet and it goes right back on. I don't need 6 sheets in my closet. So I put it in my linen bucket. And if I should need a sheet, an extra sheet, then I know where they are, right? And then I had all this space in my linen closet, like 6 shelves, and I used 3 shelves as my office, and I cleared out all that stuff. I did all that paperwork. All my binders are all set up, and my binder for next year's trip is already ready to go. I've been collecting decades of receipts and from my trip, whether it's gas or groceries, or I stop in at fast food restaurant or a cup of coffee. I've saved every single receipt. At one point I was going to add them all up, but I'm a little calculator brain when I'm on my trips, especially when it comes to budgeting and stuff. So I keep a pretty good tab on an estimate. I'm saying I'm probably off by no more than $100 or $200, but I do a pretty decent job at staying on budget, like right to the penny. Like, I don't get myself stuck way out in the boonies with no gas money or anything, right? I kind of know how that feels because I live vicariously through my dad's experiences when he spent the money. He didn't have enough money to put in the car to get us home from Vegas or Reno, and he'd have to go and talk to the hotel managers. And right, my dad was a proud man, right? He didn't like to, step down and be perceived as somebody who had a gambling problem, right? My dad loved feeling like he was the big shot. He was the high roller. And he suited that role very well. My father would have made an amazing philanthropist, and he was a very giving man. But to get to that point where he had so much money that he was able to just do kindnesses for all his friends and family and the people that he cared about, he would have loved to do something like that. And it's to each one of us to decide whether or not to pick up that baton and to carry on in the work that a parent or has done or not done, because sometimes we don't get that good mentorship too, right? Sometimes we don't have those tight relationships that we learn to value, to say, oh, I learned that, my mother taught me that, my father taught me that. That's where my good values come from. That's where my kindness and forgiveness comes from. Sometimes it's in that self parenting that we have to uh, find solutions, find understanding, kindness for ourselves, and forgiveness for ourselves, forgiveness for others too. And again, I have to say, that's somewhere's where I started too, because nothing moved for me without coming to some of those understandings for sure. Okay, let me just come down in the comments here. Okay. I'm seeing where I left off here. Yeah, but cold here too. Oh my goodness. It was minus 40 with the wind chill the past 2 days. Today it warmed up a little bit. Tomorrow, by morning, it said it's going to be minus 14 by morning. So it's going to warm up for a couple of days. But then we're going to have a couple of days of heavy snow before it starts getting cold again. But I had to Google what minus 40 Celsius was in Fahrenheit, and I learned something. I learned that minus 40 is the same in Fahrenheit and the same in Celsius. Did you know that one, Andrew? That minus 40 was the same in Celsius and in Fahrenheit. Yeah, so yeah, super cold here in Winnipeg too, but we expect that cold weather. And that cold weather doesn't mean that we're going to feel any colder than what Andrew is feeling in Bloomington, Indiana, because there's the Great Lakes around where he lives, and that cold air goes over those lakes, and that moisture in the air can feel even colder. At least here in Manitoba, it's a dry cold. There's not a lot of moisture in the air in the wintertime, so it stays pretty dry. And as long as you dress warm, and yesterday was the first day I had to go to the post office yesterday, and I wore my snow pants for the very first time this year, and I wore my big cowl, and I was so happy for my cowl. Sometimes when you learn through your failures, through your mistakes. I walked to the store yesterday. Was it yesterday or day before yesterday? Day before yesterday, I walked to the store, and it was I knew it was cold outside, so I bundled up. But when go into Safeway grocery shopping, I'm bundled up like the Pillsbury Doughboy, and it can get really hot. And you can only see my eyeballs because I got this great big furry cowl that comes right up to my eyeballs, and right, it's just too warm. So I took it off and I put it in my shopping cart, and I did my little bit of shopping. I went to the drugstore, and I went in, did my little bit of shopping, and then I went home, and then I thought, oh, I've got to go down to the bargain store. I needed paper towels. It was something I needed, right? And then and then and then I went to get dressed, and I went, where's my cowl? Where's my and this thing's amazing. Like I said, it comes right up to my eyeballs, and it's so thick, like, and quilted. It comes, I swear it comes out like this much off of each side, and just big inner tube around my neck of fluffy warmth. And I went to put it on, and it was gone. I knew instantly that I left it in the shopping cart at the grocery store. Oh, I know what I was doing. Yeah, I had to go to the bargain store. I needed some dish soap. That's what I needed. I needed dish soap. So I went to which was in the opposite direction. So after I dropped the groceries off, I got rebundled up, right? And I took off to get the rest of my shopping done, pick up a couple of stocking stuffers, and to get my dish soap, and I said, "Oh, Cindy, you should go get your cowl. Somebody would have grabbed it and put it away for you. Nobody would have stealing stuff, right? Especially with the homeless when they get their changes of clothing. They're just leaving their clothing outside wherever, right? So we don't tend to go, ooh, maybe for a pair of gloves or something sitting on a bus seat, but clothing, probably not. They would probably take that scarf and put it behind customer service for a couple of days, I thought. But oh, I says, I don't want to lose that cowl. I don't want to lose it. So I had gone all the way that way. I says, okay, Cindy, you're out on a walk now. walk back this way. So I walked back to the grocery store and I walked in, and the lady who had taken my order had said, "Oh, did you leave your scarf here?" And I said, "Yes, I did." She says, "I put it at customer service." I went, "Oh, thank you very much." Right. And I got my scarf, and off I went. But I was so happy when I got home to have gotten all those chores done that I needed to get done, right? I got all those chores done, and I felt really good. The groceries in the cupboard, the postal is done, the gifts are done. I just felt like I was on that roll of getting things done. And I didn't want to end yesterday with that feeling of, I've lost my favorite scarf. And I would have been sad I wouldn't have cried over spilt milk, but I would have been sad. I would have remembered losing that scarf. So I was so happy that I decided to go back to the grocery store and see if it was there. And it was there. I got my scarf back, and it's home safe with me. It's home safe with me again. But it sometimes it's just in our decisions, right? Because it was a super nice scarf. I would tell you, it was like deluxe, deluxe, deluxe. Absolutely love it. I never want to lose this scarf, right? And I'm assuming, right, that somebody might have thought it was just as amazing as I did when I bought it. And it would have served them well. I would have wished it well, and it would have been my own fault. But we learn from our mistakes, and if we can do something in resolving the problem that we created in our mistakes and in our failures, that maybe we can feel like we're ahead of the game a little bit. And I felt that way when I got home and I had my scarf. Um, okay, let me come down here. Andrew says, "Oh wait, Owen got snow here, about 4 inches, and very cold now." Yeah, North America, we're getting a cold winter this year already, aren't we? It feels normal compared to the past couple of years, doesn't it? It just seems that everybody has got a cold spell going on. But there's a lot more homeless now, isn't there? A lot more people living in the elements now. Maybe there isn't more, but it's more noticeable because of social media and stuff, that it gets promoted quite a bit. And living in a vulnerable community myself, then I get to see it all the time. I see it almost every day. I right there's something going on, and it's about, right, not ignoring it. We have to pay attention to it, right? Number one, be grateful that we're not in a situation like that where we have to struggle in that way, but also to have kind of the idea of, right, if that was me, how would I handle my life if I didn't have a roof over my head, if I only had whatever I could throw into a shopping cart? Would I be okay, right? Would I be able to manage? Do I have enough resilience to deal with what I have to deal with? Do I know the different resources out there like Salvation Army and income system, the welfare system? Do I know walking clinics? Do I know where all those resources are that might help me out if I should find myself struggling? Because a lot of people out on the street right now that are homeless, they don't know even that there are resources out there, because they're not really things that are talked about in their community unless somebody takes an interest, right? Somebody does interact with the vulnerable and does put themselves in that person's shoes and says, oh my goodness, is that, if that was me, what would I do? Right. And just like my dad had a lot of pride in, my dad was considered middle class, though we lived low income because we were a dynamic family, and my dad was a compulsive gambler and an adventurer in life. And he lived for the moment, and we each one of us get to make those decisions. Because I was my father's daughter, I got right. I excitedly and welcomed being tagging along with my father's adventures. So I was a willing participant in that 100%. If I could do that 24/7, 365 days all over again with my dad, I would in a moment, because of the adventures, because of the experiences and the lessons in that, right? Because possibly I might not be here in this moment if I had not had some of those experiences. And almost I can guarantee that I wouldn't, right? Okay. One of the men in my church, only 55, died of a heart attack about 2 weeks ago. I feel badly for his family, how Christmas will be for them. Yeah, I was 23 years old when my father passed away. My father was in a hospital when his heart failed him, but he had heart failure. So for my father, right, that was his greatest fear, that it would be a heart attack, something that he wouldn't be able to bear. And because he had angina, he got daily reminders of how it could be, how bad it could be. But in the end, my dad's heart just failed him, and he just passed out and then passed passed away, right? And that's congenital heart failure. That's heart attacks are usually bypassed, in that you just go straight to cold blue, it's over, right? And yeah, heart disease is prevalent, not just in my family, but it's prevalent all around the world. And it's more prevalent because we are under more stress. Oh, I don't even know if I can say that, because instantly my brain took me back to farmers in the 18th century, plowing their farm fields with just their horses, and working from dawn until the sun's going down every day. And they didn't have the innovation that we have now. So who's to say? I would assume that heart attacks were just as prevalent in the 1800s as they were in the 19th century, even now. But in that innovation, there's a lot of contributing factors to, right, heart attacks, right? It's the chemicals, the stress. Yeah, it's curious, but it's not unless you put yourself in somebody else's shoes or have those experiences for yourself, we can never really understand that, right? We might not even give it a thought of what that experience might be like, and not just be like for that person, but like what Andrew is saying, for the whole family, and being Christmas too, and that memory being tagged on to every year moving forward, right? And taking a little bit of the joy away at Christmas, right? There'll be a lot of singing in the rain in that family, right? There'll be a lot of the best of the times and the worst of the times in that family, right? But it is what it is. It's something we all have to go through, and that's resilience and experiences, right? That lots of people go through. But then again, lots of people don't go through it. They have their own experience. But you're right there, Andrew. Be tough at Christmas time, especially, and at 55 years old, right? That's not very that's not very old at all. I wonder if he had always had a heart problem. It's only been a couple of weeks, but I'm sure through the grapevine you guys will get a little bit of more information as to what happened and if there was an underlining reason for it. My father always knew that his was coming. I think he was barely out of being a teenager and he knew he didn't have much time left, but he ended up getting an extra 27 years, right? But it was an extra 27 years that he woke up every single morning knowing, right, that today could be the last day. It's why he loved life. It's why he lived life to the very fullest that he possibly could. And in order for him to do that, he didn't have much of a choice but to take his family along for that ride. So I'm not begrudging the experience that my father had, right? He made it into an adventure for all of us. And even though it wasn't always a welcomed adventure in the end, right? It's a welcomed adventure. Okay. Okay, we're coming down here. Uh it appears Christ was probably born in the summertime. Oh, I didn't know that. But that his birth was celebrated during the Roman Saturnalia to hide the celebration alongside the Roman celebration. I knew you had the answer, Andrew. But that's interesting. I didn't know that it was in the summertime. Yeah, me too, Andrew. When it comes to getting my stuff in order, I am slowly thinning out my stuff. Like for the amount of stuff that I have moved along, and I've moved along a ton. It still looks like I have a ton. This wall will be the last of the wall. If you could see my apartment, you saw my apartment like a while ago, you would say, "Oh my goodness, Cindy, where is everything?" Right? But the way I'm spreading it out and everything, it just makes it still like there's a lot. And this stuff will take a little bit longer to move along. These are just 10, 20, $30 items, and I just get them listed, and as they go, they will go. I'm not going to be able to take them with me, right? I plan on hitting the road, right? At some point, I would love to do, you know, um, live in my van, do provincial parks, right? And live that life. But again, that's a life that, it's not going to be any cheaper than if I were to stay here. So it's got to be something that is set up and funded properly in, well, however I decide that I'm going to pay for that experience, right? That pension will get you by, but it's not about just getting by. I'm building the best life for myself as I possibly can, right? I'm going to create the most magnificent life for myself. And, right, I'm grateful that I have my brand, that it all adds up into content at the same time. It's just a nice, lovely package of a life, right? And, it's still a lot of singing in the rain, whistle while you work, but I'm okay with that. And I have to be grateful, right? Because a lot of people don't have that prerogative to do it the way I'm doing it in the moment. And that's because, right, I know my I know my resources, and in my little bit of movement, I know, right? Even though I feel bad sometimes, I know the movement that I'm supposed to be making. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, right? And and I am whistling while I work, right? And I am singing in the rain. But I'm having a blast at it, right? I'm having a blast. And, not everybody has that prerogative to live the life the way that they want to live it from moment to moment. And a lot of people wouldn't even take that chance, right? But, you know, if somebody's willing, then somebody should, right? And so we'll just see. I'm just going to keep making the movement that I'm moving, and we'll just see in the greater scheme of things how it all works out, right? Right? I don't worry too much. And maybe that comes from my father's lessons, in watching him live his life to the very fullest, right? Living in the moment, living for right now, and not worrying so much about what was going to happen tomorrow or what's going to happen next week. I do live quite a bit in the future because I want to see that axe coming down, right? I want to see that boulder rolling down the hill, taking everything out of it, so I have an opportunity to get out of its way. I've always been that way. It's part of my hypervigilant. But in recent years, and experiencing, just living in the moment and just watching how things unfold, that I recognize that, right, everything is going to be okay. And I think in the end, just in that idea that I don't immerse myself in the news and all that media that just loves to get us all worked up, that that frustration, that stress, that anxiety, that what ifs, and just, right, just don't get to step in the door into my life. And it makes me feel better, that it makes me feel that maybe I can do a little bit more. I can take a little bit more onto my plate, because that stuff isn't in my vicinity or on my plate in any way, right? But we each get to decide in that. Um, wow. Your mother held on to everything. Well, the idea was for me to do it today is because I want to be able, at least for the next 6 years, while I settle into my system, that, I have the experience of these past 6 years. But also, I understand, after 6 years, I wanted to kind of treat it like a new beginning, right? Because here in Canada, everything is in a rotation of 6 years, right? And so you have to keep all your bank papers and statements and taxes and receipts. You got to keep that for 6 years. So I said, okay, well, let's start it today, so that I can keep everything, and do another clean out next year, so that I can keep a lot of my documentation of some of those amazing experiences that I have had in the past half a dozen years or so. Pretty magnificent, wild, out of your, I would never have thought it, and they're still happening, these incredible, wondrous moments that come into my life. And I said, how? Why? I'm right. I'm not saying no. I'm grateful, but why? How? But sometimes, right, if you could just not delve into those questions and just say, okay, thank you very much. Next, right? And then you're not putting any energy or effort, just appreciation into what's good that comes into your path, and not worry so much that you have to know the answer to absolutely everything. That's what got me into this. I'm not going to say mess because it served me so well, but I had questions in my life. I wanted to understand those dynamic relationships in my family. I wanted to know what went wrong. And, when I had an opportunity to delve into it and get some answers, it only made me hungry for more. And, in what was revealed, it helped me to understand, and it gave me some peace of mind. It gave me some peace of soul, right? That I had a little bit of understanding. And that's when the right things started happening with the forgiveness and stuff. And, it's just a matter of starting, right? And getting that ball rolling, putting one foot in front of the other. We were talking about it yesterday on my live yesterday, that lots of times we think that things are such a big deal, that they are impossible, that we're never going to get it done, that we're too old, or we don't have enough time, or we're not physically, mentally, or emotionally capable for whatever reason. We just give ourselves those outs. But if we find that we just try, right, and just do one thing towards getting that goal, dream, wish, right, passion, question answered, that sometimes it's just in those baby steps that we can find the next step. And that's how it worked for me, and that's how I continue to keep moving. I'm getting stuff done today. But in that, I'm not choosing my content, right? Because I got stuff to do, but I don't want to do it in the complete quiet, right? And just I could, but I don't want to. I could put music on and just enjoy music while I'm doing the chores, but I put some Carl Young in the background and I listened to that. And then when that one was over, then I just let YouTube decide what the next one is going to be and what the next one's going to be. And they do such a good job. They know me so well because I was enjoying, right, the background chatter today as I was getting some big projects done today. Yeah, I'm so happy I got all that paper done. There was so much of it. There was like government stuff and oh my goodness, pay stubs. There was all kinds of stuff that I was able to get rid of. And now, right, all I have to deal with is that little drawer and do that every couple of months just to file whatever I put in that drawer away. And now forever, I can keep that tidy. Well, probably not, because in another few years, I'm going to want to go back in and clear it all out again, too, because there's some stuff that I've been holding on. I held on during those months of COVID, some legalities and some issues that we were all having issues. And I had to keep all the documentation on that entire experience. But I put that in a big freezer bag, all that paperwork, and I just put it away. So when I go back into it in the next another few years, right, I'll be able to just take that bag and just toss it. But for the moment, I just want to hold on to it, right? Because you never know. And also, the legal papers, when I was on the bus and I got thrown on the bus and I broke my glasses and I tried to sue the city, I kept that too. I have another year to decide whether or not to sue in that. I'm not going to sue in that, right? But I do mention to everybody, if you plan on suing the Canadian government or the city, at all, you got 7 days to do it from whatever happened that you felt like you need to bring up some kind of suit in that. Yeah, so get some advice. I only lucked out because I went straight to get some advice because I didn't have $1,000 to buy a new pair of glasses. I ended up having to come up with the money anyway, but just trusting that everything was going to be okay. And these miracles, they just come into your life at the perfect timing. So, whatever is not in my life in this moment that I so desperately want, I just have to trust. It's just in the timing. It's still coming to me, just not in this moment. Okay. Uh, Andrew says, here in Bloomington, we have homeless people from other communities who have been brought here and dropped off. Social services for local people are maxed out because of people from elsewhere. Yeah, I heard something about that too, Andrew, that they would give you a one-way ticket free anywhere you want to go as long as you get out of their city. There are some cities in the states that are doing really, really well with their homeless. They have where was it? Dallas? Was it in Dallas? They have a no downtown homeless policy. So the homeless are not allowed to be downtown. They're not allowed to sleep in the corridors or hang out down there begging or anything. Now, right, it's hard in stereotyping when somebody is down and out or somebody's just getting off of a construction job and just totally messed up without a shower. So there's got to be considerations in that. But, this guy was giving us a walk of his downtown area, and there were no homeless people. And they had a downtown park, too, a park in the downtown area. There weren't even any tents or homeless people wandering around in the park or anything. But right, it is a situation. Even here in Winnipeg, I saw a post on Instagram of the different areas that the homeless are set up. Downtown, there's a big encampment for, I guess, the indigenous and the really down and out are in this encampment downtown. And along the rivers, we have two rivers that cross right downtown Winnipeg. And so along the riverbanks, there are a lot of encampments. Um, uh, but for the most part, they're sleeping in the apartment stairwells. Here in Winnipeg, the churches open up the floors. So you go in, stand at the door at 7 o'clock at night. They'll open up the doors for an hour where everybody can get in, and then everybody settles down for the night. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, everybody gets up, right? And they get a little breakfast, and then they're sent on their way. They're out the door by 8 o'clock in the morning. But at least they have a warm place to sleep at night. And I don't know how many churches do that. I know one church in my neighborhood does do that. They also have a restaurant that they open up. It's just for homeless people, but it's an actual restaurant, and they open up the doors in the evening, and right, people can come in and get a free meal. Somebody in this building asked me if I wanted to go have dinner with him. That's why the only reason I knew it. And I've walked by it, and I see people standing out there. I wasn't quite sure. I thought it was maybe for clothes or something, or because I knew that people were sleeping there at night, that maybe they were just getting let in early because it was cold. But yeah, it's a restaurant where they can have waitress and a nice meal and feel like a human being. Everybody deserves to feel like a human being. Oh my goodness, So many people being kept in place so that somebody else can feel better about themselves. That's a terrible way, right? To make movement for oneself is to do it on the backs of somebody else, right? Not feeling good. But this is the way it's been for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and it's not something we're going to learn overnight, right? We are doing much better now, right? Being this close to anybody in the whole world now that, we'll be able to run positively off of each other. We'll be able to learn and be the examples for each other a whole lot easier than, you know, in the old days where these kind of platforms that didn't even exist, but consider this a stage in a Broadway play, right? The small man can find a place at this table, right? If I can do this, you can do this. Anybody could do this. It's just a matter of being dedicated and consistent and open to be learning constantly, right? I don't know if constantly. Once you learn your craft, I guess you can ease up a little bit. But in what I'm doing, right, it changes day to day in a way that something else is added on. And that's a good thing. That keeps me evolving. And that's the truth, right? Yeah. Be the example, right? It's an amazing life, and I think I can fairly trust that reason of my dad living his life vicariously, right? That he wanted to make the best life for himself as he possibly can, and I just assume that's the way you lived life, right? That's the way I was brought up. This was life. The hairy, scary, the roller coaster, the adventure, the good stuff, the bad stuff, right? It was the whole shebang. And, it offered up lots of reasons. I think, that resilience that I have, that all my sisters have, it comes from that experience, right? That my dad had in his creation of the best human being he possibly could in a family that was super dynamic, who all had their own ideas about what life was. But because we loved our dad, we went along for that ride. And lots of us do, don't we? Sometimes it's just also the programming that we're brought up, right? Just to respect. But my dad did make it as enjoyable as he could for everybody, right? And as easy for everybody as he possibly could. Yeah. We're always so eager to point out what people didn't get wrong, but we don't appreciate what people actually got right. Right? My sisters are pretty amazing, are pretty resilient, pretty independent, sometimes too independent. Me, right? Just as guilty as that. And I don't know if it was the experiences that we had or if that was the intent of my dad to teach us to stand on our own 2 feet. And I have to say, right, my mother was partnered with him, so I'm not going to take that credit and just give it all to my dad. My mother was party to that too. But sometimes in our relationships, we don't want to give credit where credit, right? Because we don't feel credit is due. But if credit is due, credit is due. And my mother was partnered in that. And I think, us kids, even though we do struggle and we do have issues, I think we did pretty pretty darn amazing. I think we did. Okay, let's come down here. Am I almost down here in the comments already? Holy moly, I never make it that far. We must be having a quiet evening tonight. Um, See, Andrew says the man at my church did have a heart condition, so his death wasn't entirely a surprise. There's one grandchild, and one of his and his wife children is still in high school. Yeah, that's tough, right? That's tough when the kids were young. Yeah, even with me, I was 23 years old. I think that was too young. But my dad, since I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, every 6 months till the time I was in my 20s for sure. Oh, right up until he died, every few months we would talk about death. My dad wanted his kids and his family to be prepared for when he passed away. There wasn't too much that he could do financially for his family, only because he wasn't eligible for insurance with any of his jobs. In fact, he lost some pretty good jobs because he wasn't insurable. Um, but there was no money uh, when my father passed away. There was no extra attention because he had these medical issues. Mind you, they took him out of the workforce. I think my dad was maybe about 40 years old when they took his fishing license away from him and tried to take his cabbie license. But my dad was creative, and he adapted. He conquered, and his solution was to move his whole family to Winnipeg, Manitoba from British Columbia and start all over again. Did he drive cab here? Yeah, he did. My father did drive cab here in Winnipeg for a little while until right, as soon as it's documented that he had an issue, they took his license away and he ended up losing it again. And I think, in the end, right, things change, and there are seasons where things go really well, and there were seasons that things didn't go so well. And towards the end, he was struggling. He was struggling pretty bad, right? But he took it on his chin. He never pulled anybody into those miseries and those struggles of his, right? More often than not, he would try to hide, but sometimes, you can't hide angina. It's pretty scary for the experiencer, and it's pretty scary for the spectator too, right? Because just not politeness of sitting there and waiting to see if it's over. It's like sitting there and waiting to see if it's the big one, and then right, and then afterwards having that relief. And what can I do? Cup of tea, right? Can I rub your feet? What can I do for you, right? And but you do that for the people that you care for, because they do that for you, right? And that's the truth. Yeah, I like telling stories about my dad. He was a very interesting being, 100%. Super smart too. Yeah. You'd have a tough time competing with my dad there, Andrew. Yeah. And he was a yapper like you too. Like right? He loved to express himself too. Was very interesting, like you were interesting, Andrew. And he prided himself in being a student in his life. I never woke up to any of those ideas until decades after he was away. But in this moment, I'd like to consider that maybe, you know, I'm a little bit like him, or the way he was back then, because I'm gobbling it up too, right? I would have loved to sat down and had some serious conversations with my dad. He would have been absolutely enthralled that I was in the game now. And on top of that, he would be super proud of my sister Tracy in going through that really scary, right, heart bypass operation 3 times, right? It was a triple bypass to my dad's one bypass, and he didn't make it, and she flew through it with flying colors, and that was super terrifying, like terrifying for her. But my dad would be so proud that she, right, she held herself accountable, even though she did try and weasel herself out of that operation the night before the operation, right? But smartly, she stuck to her guns, and yeah, she managed to have that operation. She's doing really, really well, you guys. I told you last week that my sister Carolyn, I don't know if I told you guys during the week, I told my audience, but my sister Carolyn, my youngest sister, had fluid around her heart. She got a really, really bad cold and didn't take care of herself. And you know how things cling on. Well, this thing clinged on and just got worse and worse and worse. And she ended up in the hospital for more than a few days. So it was pretty serious. She's home now. She's doing much better now, but it's a reminder for all of us that we can think we're the healthiest people in the world. Even for myself, I give my gratefuls all the time, but I can't just depend on my gratefuls to keep me healthy. You know what I mean? That I have to contribute to that too. I do my little ways with the vitamins and my walks, but there are lots of things that I don't do that maybe I should do. I was on tea all last week. I drank tea all last week and I felt pretty good physically. I felt a little bit of the withdrawal, right? Because I felt very emotional last week. I felt so emotional, right? Just like I could just cry on a dime last week. I'm feeling much better. I'm feeling much better this week and that. Or was it this week? Yeah, because it's the end of the week now. So I'm feeling much better in that now. But sometimes it's just our own lives that somebody, we don't realize that we're starting to hit our capacity of what we can handle. And yet we can still say, oh, you could do that one more. We're doing the paperwork today, Cindy. And what if I didn't have that capacity? Would I have been kind enough to say, okay, Cindy, right? You did lots this week. Don't worry about it. We'll just put it in the bucket. We'll do it next week. Would have I allowed myself to do that? I'm not sure because I was able to manage by just saying, we'll do it in baby steps. You're not doing big projects today, nothing major that has to get done. You can just get your buckets here and you can take in your lesson. You could just write space out if you want to. Do it slowly. Just do a good job. And I got it done, right? And it was a pretty big chore that was on my list. It wasn't on my list for a long time because I only noticed how bad it was getting maybe a month ago, but it has been on my list since then, and the bucket's been sitting beside my desk for 2 days because it was something that I wanted to get to right away. And it's done. It's all cleaned up. I got it all spaced out in my new office closet. Rather than a linen closet, it's my office closet, and I'm happy to have it because I didn't like having paper and binders and books and right. It can all stay in a nice place. And that way I know if I need it, I know exactly where it is, right? Okay, you guys. Um Yeah, I hope his family is gonna settle into that acceptance, especially, when you said that it wasn't an entirely a surprise. And sometimes in that preparation, it makes it manageable. And I have to say that through my own experience, because my dad had those talks with us, probably once or twice a year. And he would sit us down, we'd go out in the backyard, and we would talk about death. He wanted us to be prepared to the best of our abilities. And, going back there and putting myself in my own shoes, it was pretty tough. I spent 24 hours sitting in a bathtub of cold water, right? Because I couldn't get out of the bathtub. It was pretty tough. My dad was my best friend. He was the only person who ever cared for me in my entire life. This is the way I felt, right? And so, I can say that I handled it badly, but there were things that I was able to do that helped me to come out of it pretty quickly. Like I said, there was a sense of freedom that surfaced almost immediately. Um, and that was because, I didn't want to let my dad down. And, I overextended myself a lot to make sure that, I pleased my father at the very least. So there was a sense of freedom that I didn't have to hold up to that bargain anymore, right? Also, that idea of singing in the rain and whistle while you work. And it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I remember, when my father passed away, the night of the funeral, all my friends took me to a nightclub and we danced all night. We partied all night. Who does that on the day of a funeral? I did, right? And it made me feel better. It did make me feel better being around people who cared for me. They truly did care for me. I'm very grateful that in my lifetime that I've had people that truly cared for me. As much as there were people, right, could care less whether I came or went or lived or died, there were people who loved me. And so that makes it so that I can make that little bit of movement and feel that at the very least, right, that I'm welcome to it. That's the truth. Okay, you guys, I think we should tie it up tonight. Should we tie it up 10 minutes early? Cindy's lost lost her momentum in topics of conversation unless somebody else there has something to contribute tonight in the conversation. I'm just hoping everybody is settled in and comfortably getting ready for Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, if it's another holiday that you celebrate during the season, I hope you're all ready for that and settled into those small traditions that are important, you guys, right? It keeps us to understand that we're human and we're only as good as the person that's holding us up or the person that we're holding up, right? That we learn from each other and we are the people that we surround ourselves with. So I hope we all surrounding ourselves with good people. And if we're not, you can come and hang out here on Sundays because I have the best people ever who hang out here. You guys, I think that's going to be it for me tonight. 8 days away, Andrew. 8 days. 8 days, and it's Christmas. Oh my goodness. And then we'll be able to settle into winter. Right? January is just applying ourselves, getting things back into routine and back to right, back to the mundane of getting things done. But then come, right? February, we're looking forward to spring already, right? I'm already looking forward. I've been into all my paperwork today on park maps. I was laminating a whole bunch of those maps that I have of the different parks in Ontario. I'm looking forward to going in now with some of that paperwork all nicely stacked in a file and go in and pick my parks for next year. We're going to go a little bit further south next year. There's one park in particular that I want to visit, and there's lots of provincial parks in that area. So we're going to pick 4 new parks, and yeah, we're going to add that to the itinerary. It'll probably be six parks that we do next year. I want to go for at least 10 days. The first 2 days are basically traveling, so I might just do one night in each park. In the first couple, oh no, it was so nice just to flake that first day that I was on the road. I was so happy to be at Black Lake for 2 days. Oh my goodness. I just thinking how exhausted I was that entire trip. When I go back, I was in the footage too again this week looking for stuff, and I was in the footage, and I'm listening to myself and I'm going, oh my goodness, Cindy, you just sound like you've just been beaten up by a hurricane. I was so exhausted the whole time, but all I could think of, last year was the best year yet. I had so much fun. And I truly feel that way, right? But it's in that ideal of whistling while you work. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Singing in the rain, which I did. Okay, you guys. Have a great night. We'll see you next week. If you want to pop in during the week, I'm here at 9 p.m. every single night for What's My Good Cheer. It's a little bit heavier in the topics. That's why I come in here on Sunday. And if you think I'm heavy on Sunday on the topics, you come in during the week and you'll see that I'm a little bit more serious in what I'm bringing to the table. But that again, right? That is in practicing my craft, isn't it? And in the end, life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. You guys, have a great night. See you next week.